Yeah, I think it may be relatively safe to say that man's existence or man's pursuit while alive is always in some form of trying to get back to the garden. It's like there's this memory, if you will. I don't know. But there's an impulse provoking against the way things are toward, like I said, whether it's memory, some intuitive understanding to each of how things to them ought to be. And there's a great variance in that, obviously. I'm not making a pitch for Paradise Lost or trying to get too poetic here, but that there's this striving for a place that has never been experienced and yet is known to be, in a sense. A place of utter contentment, some might say pleasure, and that's why I say it's different for everyone. For the pedophile, for the greedy man, for the murderer, his paradise is going to look a little different than, let's say, a more benevolent personality, if you will. I know that's extreme and perhaps coarse, but I think you understand what I'm saying, that everybody is striving to get to a place of fulfillment, if you will. And that varies, as I said, over personalities, over persons, what each perceives that as. And as I haven't been shy before to say, I get a lot, I've said it, I get a lot of theology, but it's really not. It's a confirmation of theology, if you will. A confirmation of certain considerations. Even a clarification of certain considerations that I've had, but then they suddenly become more clear. And it often comes through movies or stories. It can come through poems. It can come through a book. It can come through all sorts of things. Come through common experiences and shopping at Walmart. You know, it doesn't matter how it comes. Call it revelation, epiphany, whatever. But, you know, that's all in God's hands, how he gets a thing over to somebody. And how they start considering it is also in his hands. So if he cares to confirm it, he confirms it. So in this particular case, I'm thinking about the best imagination of heaven, the best imagination of what we would call paradise or heaven, is really hell. Because heaven is beyond imagining. The place God is beyond imagining. And so the best imagination of it falls so hideously short of it that ultimately, taken to extreme, the infinite rightness, righteousness, pleasure, joy of heaven so outstrips what we could imagine as to make what we would imagine hell. So I'm watching this movie, and this guy, he's terrified of dying. He lets on, he tries to pretend he's not, but his whole impetus through the movie, it's a stupid movie, but and he's a tech billionaire, his whole impetus is to, he wants to upload his consciousness, you know, he doesn't want to die, he wants to get out of this perishing body, you know. And I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, you know, yeah, to him that's paradise, you know, because he even expresses it that way to other people, you know. We're working on this thing where, you know, think of it, billions of perfected souls, can inhabit, their own their paradise, and because ultimately he's shown to be in no relationship to anyone except his own will, desire, passions, lusts, that his idea of heaven beating death, which can sometimes just be our imagination of heaven, just beating death, is so far short of the reality and the depth and the eternal magnificence of God as to be hell. So I'm thinking of that, and I'm thinking, this guy might accept that as his heaven. That might be the fulfillment of all for him. Would it matter to me if? Would it matter to any man? Let's say any man. Should it matter to any man who were or was transported completely in every way, in all consciousness, to the presence of God, that man transported to the presence of God, would it be important at all to him to know that that guy who chose the lesser was in hell? In other words, is there any residual or great amount, even, not even residual, thing that not only takes pleasure, but really has a fundamental desire for the pleasure of those who, let's say, are wrong, to know they are wrong? It's not enough to be in the presence of God. It would also be important to let those who aren't know that you know that they're not there, and that they know that they're not there. In other words, a form of shaming. Would it be important to that person that those people now be ashamed of themselves? Do you understand that? Could there be any of that in the presence of God? To rejoice over your enemies, so to speak, in whatever form they were or are, in whatever form they might be conceived, perceived, conceptualized, imagined, that if in full consciousness there was still some necessity of letting them know that you knew that they didn't make it and they knew they didn't make it? Or would it be, let them have what they have and you have what you have? Do you understand that? So that was what my consideration was before, and then when that came up in the movie, and I thought to myself, what a hideous thing this guy is opting for. But he's so terrified of death and the loss of himself and the loss of his being, that for him it would be heaven to escape into an electronic or a non-bodily experience. Let's put it that way. That would be all of heaven for him. And we do understand, we do confess, that in God there is no more dying, tears, suffering. He'll wipe away every tear and all remembrances, even of enemies. Even of enemies. There's that scripture that speaks, the Lord speaking and saying, there'll come a time when you look for enemies and you will not find them. So, those were my musings. Is it enough to just have the Lord encourage others that there is a heaven you can't imagine? There is a person you can't imagine, unimaginably good, unimaginably perfect, unimaginably righteous, unimaginably forgiving and merciful and kind. And you can know him. But if you opt to know something else, you opt to know something else. Is it enough that you or I know God? Or do we have to know, in a sense, that we can rub our enemies' noses in it, that they didn't make it? And maybe each man will have the heaven he imagines, not knowing it's hell. And maybe that's all right. Where the worm dieth not, and there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Even now, a lot of people think they're in paradise with what they have, who they are, what they do. To some extent, they've attained to some great measure of something in this world, and still eaten up. And I think we're eaten up with thoughts of enemies until we're not. I think there's a necessity for us to have an adversary to overcome. And I think we will be and are being surprised at who that is and where his seat is and who the man of sin is. Be well, be blessed, be encouraged, be comforted, and rejoice in the Lord always.